Study your intervals sounds a lot like eat your broccoli. It's supposed to be good for you, but it's super icky. Granted, there's a lot inside the study of intervals, but it turns out just getting started is a lot easier than you think. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you will get your first interval lesson. Now, the study of intervals is fairly complex, but what I like to do is boil all those complexities down to something really simple and attach it to something we already know so we get a firm foothold, right? And from there, we can expand that knowledge and continue our education since we've got such a solid foundation. So we're going to take a few things that we already know, a power chord and a couple of pentatonic scales. And we're going to use those to map intervals to something that we're already familiar with, right? Something we can already see and play on the fretboard. And if we can expose what intervals are inside those structures, we'll have a good solid start. Let's zoom in and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, our goal here is just to get a starter set of intervals. A set of intervals that we can see on the fretboard and then expand on later on as we get more and more curious about what intervals are left. This starter set will leave some gaps, but it really forms a great starting point. So we're going to use three different shapes that are very easy and very accessible, and you probably already know these. We're going to use a power chord. We're going to be using the root on the E string, 5th fret, that's an A, for all of three of these shapes. The power chord first, then we're going to use the major pentatonic scale, and then we're going to use the minor pentatonic scale, just off of that one root, that A note. And you'll notice we're only going up one octave. And that octave is our first interval. So let's get to the power chord first. This power chord is built using the root on the E string, 5th fret, and then on the D and A string, 7th fret. You probably already know this. Let's tear this apart and look at these intervals. This first one we're going to use is the octave. These are both of the A notes in this chord. The octave is also referred to as a perfect interval because it's very stable. Given that these two notes are exactly the same, just an octave apart, in other words, this one is twice the frequency range of this, it's a very stable sound when you play these intervals together. The other note in this shape is this one here. This interval, this distance, right, this set of notes is called a perfect fifth. It's derived from the major scale. I'll just prove that out here really quickly. If I just play an A major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the fifth note of an A major scale. But this distance between these two notes is called a perfect fifth. And again, that word perfect comes from the fact that this stable set of frequencies is very strong, just like our octave. It's a very stable sound. So, from the power chord, we have an octave and a perfect fifth. We're building out our library of intervals nice and slowly at first, using simple stuff. The next thing up is that major pentatonic scale. If you don't know this, I'm going to play A major pentatonic, starting on that root on the 5th fret of the E string. And it looks like this. Fret numbers are 5, 7, 4, 7, 4, 7. This is the My Girl scale. Really easy shape to know. You might already know this. So let's find the intervals in this shape. That first set of notes, we can't listen to these at the same time because they're on the same string. So while this is an interval of a major second, a whole step, 2 frets, in order to hear what that interval sounds like, we need to move this note down to the next string. This is a B. There it is. The A and the B together form a major second interval. Not a very stable sounding interval. Pretty harsh, actually. So our first interval in the major pentatonic scale is that major second. There's our next note in the scale. That is a major third. It gets its name from the major scale again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's the third note in the major scale. And this distance, this interval, is a major third. Next up in this scale shape is our perfect fifth again. We've already got that from our power chord, but this scale has that same interval in it as well. Next note in the scale, this one's called a major sixth. And again, this comes from the major scale. Watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's our major sixth interval. And that leads us to the octave again, the last note in this scale. So the octave appears in the scale as well as in our power chord. So far, just from the power chord and the major pentatonic scale, we have the following intervals: a major second, major third, perfect fifth, major sixth, and an octave. Now we're going to use the minor pentatonic scale next to fill in some gaps here. Starting on that same note, our first note here is called a minor third. This is the distance of 3 frets, or a step and a half. But again, we can't play these at the same time since they're on the same string. So we have to move this note, which is C, down to here. Here's our minor third interval. Pretty dirty sounding interval this low, not too stable, but that's our minor third. Next note in the scale, this is a new one. This is our perfect fourth interval. That's the interval of a perfect fourth. The guitar is tuned in fourths, by the way. And again, it gets its name from the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fourth note in the major scale. It's the distance of a perfect fourth. It's perfect again because super stable. Unlike that minor third, listen to this, or the major second. Not a very easy interval to hear, but that perfect fourth is nice and stable. Next note in our minor pentatonic scale is our perfect fifth. We've already got that from the last two shapes, that power chord as well as the major pentatonic scale. The next note in the minor pentatonic scale is this one. That's a minor seventh. If we were to take a major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and lower the seventh, we have our minor seventh interval. And the last note on the scale is, of course, the octave. So from the power chord, that major pentatonic scale, and the minor pentatonic scale, we've derived the following intervals: major second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, minor seventh, and octave. As you can see, that's a large library of intervals to start with. Now there are more intervals than that. These intervals serve as a really, really good starting point. Once you can see these and hear them and investigate what they sound like, get used to playing them and hearing them, you can then go ahead and fill in these gaps with more information. What's the minor second? What about that minor sixth? What about the major seventh? They all exist inside these gaps, stuff like the flat five. But starting here at least gives you a foothold, right? You've got something to hold on to and a library of intervals to expand from. Okay, well there it is. Short and sweet. A good start on intervals. You can see just by taking the shapes that we already know, things that we already know how to play, and investigating them, just starting to apply some nomenclature and some identification to what we already know, we end up with a library of intervals that we can build on. And attaching knowledge to something you already understand and already know is much more effective than just trying to learn everything from rote right out of the box. Study every single interval. In the use case we just did, now we can add in intervals whenever we feel curious about them. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope this was informative for you. Above everything else, I hope it's given you a little bit of interest into what's next for intervals, right? What else is out there? What other great sounds are out there? Tabs for this lesson are on my Patreon page. You can also study with me in the studio, my online guitar academy. Links for both of those places are in the description below. As always, hope you found this interesting. Hope you found it helpful. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.